Dieter took his time, cutting select pieces from the body and carefully wrapping them to eat later. The rest he buried securely in the woods. No one would ever find him here, he knew. Later, when he met the party, he told them that he wasn't able to sleep last night, so he went for a stroll to get some air. He explained that he had seen some horseback messenger come for Tobias while he was out on one of his nighttime forays. He told the group that the messenger had told Tobias that he was required back at the city of Altdorf immediately. Tobias had then taken a pony, asking Dieter to tell the rest of the group that he had to leave in this way. Maestro had asked what sort of messenger it was. Dieter thought for a moment and worked more of his hypnosis to dumbfound the wizard's already screwy mind. He then pretended that he had remembered that it was a man bearing the colours of the Celestial College, white and blue robes. Maestro considered for a moment. Dieter could sense Maestro's difficulty at taking this story in, so he added, "I can't imagine how they knew we were here, though. Right out in the middle of nowhere." At that point, Maestro unwittingly helped out by saying, "Oh, I can! My college are a strange lot. If they've had a vision pertaining to a specific event, they can sometimes really pinpoint the location of the event, or those involved in it. A sort of magical divination, if you like. It's because that person is part of the thread of fate, and they can follow that thread wherever it goes once they have it. But that is if the event lets them." Dieter feigned surprise at Maestro's answer. In truth, he was only really surprised at how silly the wizard was. "Then I suppose this must have been quite important." "I suppose so," came the wizard's considered reply. The party of 3 made it back to the city without any other complications. It felt strange to them to be so few in number, but the trip had adjusted them to that. Once they had arrived back at the city, of course, they were able to separate as much as they'd wanted. This was especially good for Tordrad, who had been going crazy being forced to spend so much time with Maestro. Maestro's first stop was Magnamus. He was terribly afraid for him suddenly, having a vision of his tower on fire. He ran all the way to the place where his master lived, and saw that it was standing just fine. Maestro let himself in and made his way upstairs, only to be greeted by silence. That was unusual for Magnamus, who normally would greet him with enthusiasm and warmth. A cold, sinking feeling began to grow as Maestro made his way up, floor after floor, all the way to Magnamus's bedroom. There he knocked the door and heard no reply. He realized that he wouldn't be disturbing anyone if no one was there, so he opened the door and checked. What he saw made him wish he hadn't. There on a bed lay Magnamus, his face as white as a sheet. He had died. Maestro could tell at once. As the wizard came closer, he saw Magnamus laying peacefully, his hands upon his own chest. Maestro didn't know what to do. How, he wondered, how could Magnamus just be dead? Suddenly the gem the wizard wore in his large red ring upon his finger glowed in response to the proximity of Maestro's power stone he kept bound to his stave. Maestro felt a spell go off and yet saw nothing cast anywhere about him. He then realized it had to have been a delayed response spell, configured to perfectly react to the presence of his staff. He wondered why Magnamus had done that. Suddenly, as part of the spell, the wall began to burn. That is the spell that had been cast, Maestro realized, a delayed fire-writing spell. Magnamus had used etheric energy to imprint an invisible written message into his own wallpaper. Only now the spell had been triggered did the built-up etheric power respond and spend itself, becoming flame and burning the words into the wall. The message was so long that it ran to the floor and continued there. There before Maestro was Magnamus's final instructions to his student. It read,
"Maestro, do not fret that my illness has led me to death. I did not have to be a seer to know it was coming. I did not tell you about it because you are a young man, one who does not need the weight of problems on his mind while trying to preserve the arduous conditions of the wilds. I've been there. I understand. But you must now take from me the legacy I hold. More than just this tower and my library, you must take from me the item that has been passed down, from dying wizard to dying wizard, each understanding that it is a wholly important artifact that must alter the course of this world's future. For each magister that held it, the knowledge was clear. Each could just feel it in their hearts. You must take from me the key of fate, Maestro, and keep it as I did. You must find a lock that fits it, and only then will it have completed its journey. I thought I would be the fated one for it, the key being the symbol of my order. I now hope that person will be you. But if it is not, be sure to give it to another wizard upon your death. The journey must continue, as must yours, while mine, alas, ends here. Take from my hands the artifact, and guard it well. I am proud of what you have achieved, Maestro. You are now a superb wizard. I always knew you would be. Goodbye, my friend. Magnanimous.
Maestro fought hard to keep his tears back as he read the last of the note and spun around to look at Magnanimous. There, in his open palm, rested a large silver key. In the centre of its handle was a blue precious stone. Maestro couldn't discern what manner of gem this was, nor whether or not it was magical. It was a mystery for him to gaze upon something that gave no readings of magic, but in a way that felt so unnatural that there could be magic involved. He carefully took the key from his master's palm. As he did so, Magnanimous's body immediately caught alight, making Maestro jump back in fright. Just like Magnanimous to go too far, thought Maestro. Now what mess had he gotten him into? Maestro inspected the key, and knew that he had to fulfill this final wish from his master. He wanted to break down and cry there and then. He trembled and felt his feet might give way at any moment. Then he realized that he had one last thing to do before he could just let his grief out. Anastasia had made it back to the city safely, and she was waiting in the Celestial College as Maestro visited the place to give his report. Every security official saw the wizards coming and instantly opened the way for him, without him having to say a word. He had gotten used to strange behaviour like this from the staff in this place. The way was clear for Maestro as he made his way to the Patriarch's office. Around his neck, on a silver chain, he wore the Key of Fate, wondering if it might be in some way cursed, seeing as it was always passed on from dying wizards. Karl Franz had already taken a report from the official mission notes that Tobias had passed to Anastasia before she'd left, so he did not feel the need to meet with Maestro. This was for the better, as he saw it. Maestro had come to speak about the issue of why he shouldn't take an apprentice. It was explained to him that every magister had to take an apprentice, that he would not be able to get out of it. Maestro got out of it. He had already done his homework on the subject, and found that there was only one technical loophole to allow a wizard to avoid ever taking an apprentice. For him or her to become a Master Vigilant. A wizard who was specially trained in hunting black magisters, those wizards who disobeyed the laws and turned against the Empire, or even those who simply ran away to take advantage of their powers for their own ends. Such wizards were a danger to the Empire. Of course, this information confused the board of officials who heard his request. Their chief concern was that while Maestro had indeed grown powerful travelling in the wilds, a great deal of training was required to become a vigilant. But added to that was the problem that Maestro's own wishes were to be something other than a wizard. The board's concern was that he might end up sympathising and even aiding a rogue magister. A long period of training would be required to prove himself worthy to them. Maestro was certain that this was the route he wanted to take. Well, it wasn't, but it was better than having to have an apprentice on him in his ear while he tried to design new schematics. While Maestro had thought he had come to the Patriarch and his staff to explain his request, the truth was, the college officials had wanted to talk to him. They explained that after careful observation of Anastasia's future thread of fate, she was indeed going to play an important role in the ongoing well-being of the old world itself. Now Maestro had heard it from the Patriarch, he knew this was going to be bad. This was confirmed when they told him that he was going to have to look after the girl and undertake her thread of vision personally. They told Maestro, as he spluttered in response, that while they too could see into the girl's future, Maestro's own vision was more keenly attuned to her particular fate than the rest of them. They said that because the matter was so important, they had to have the wizard with the most attuned clarity working on the case. They too were not happy that that person happened to be Maestro. So it came to be that the girl would be studied by the college, with Maestro leading the research team with his visions. Tordrad would often visit her, speaking in Kislev. She was amazed at how beautiful the place sounded when he had explained of his life there. He had told her that he'd formerly been in the Tsarina's royal bodyguard, but had been kicked out, removed for attempting to kill his guard captain. The man had tried to force himself on Tordrad's younger lady friend. They were only friends, but Tordrad had grown up with the girl and thought very much of her as a sister. There had never been enough proof to bring the man to justice, and Tordrad had of course been exiled from his homeland. Now they spoke of returning her to Kislev to understand what her roots truly meant. They also both realised that this might take a very long time indeed, due to the testing the wizards were doing all the time. Tordrad didn't mind though. He was enjoying delaying the awkward return trip. They both found they enjoyed each other's company a great deal, and grew closer as the days, and then months, went on. A full palace investigation into Tobias's whereabouts was underway. The theory was that Tobias had fallen foul upon the road somewhere, or that a dark betrayer had posed as a city messenger that night, based on Dieter's story, for the college had explained that they had sent no such messenger for him. For weeks, men searched the paths between those woods and the main road that led to Altdorf, and no sign was ever found. Tobias's wife mourned him as dead. She had warned him about going on those roads, but he hadn't listened. Frederick had waited at their usual meeting place, but Tobias, of course, hadn't come. Instead, Frederick was surprised to see Dieter appear. The trainee doctor had explained that he was the last person to see Tobias, and that he had gone missing somewhere on the roads. Frederick knew that this probably meant his brother was dead. Dieter looked away so he did not have to see Frederick's pained expression. That he probably would never see his brother again. Dieter explained that Tobias had shown him the note, and that is why he knew he would be waiting for him here. He said that it was the least he could do, for his old travelling companion and friend. Dieter forced himself to be understanding, and patted the halfling on the back with a serious demeanour. "I am sorry for your loss," he had told him. That was a lie. Dieter quickly got back to working at his medical clinic, studying the bodies of those who came his way for examination. Sometimes just because he had a body on his slab where the cause of death was apparent, without any need of investigation for the watch's sake, for he had been the one to have murdered them. Of course he had to file some sort of report for appearance's sake. Dieter loved being back in the big city. A city like this could swallow you up and hide all sorts of atrocities. Dieter had started experimenting on the piece of warpstone he had taken from Tobias. His plans were dark and cruel. He was scheming up an idea involving the chaotic organ that still lived inside the glass container, and the warpstone. May Sigmar preserve us all. As Frederick turned to walk away after Dieter had left his company that day, a voice from the side caught his attention. "Hey, Frederick will watch." The halfling looked around. He'd been discovered. No one should know his identity here. That meant the authorities could arrive at any moment. The black-robed person who stood inside the alleyway saw that the halfling was worried and comforted him with, "I am not going to tell anyone you are here.
Relax.
Frederick fought back his fear to make his way over to the alleyway, where he looked at the man at last. He was tall and slim, his face obscured by the robes covering his head. The halfling asked, "How do you know of my name, stranger?" The robed man introduced himself.
I am Heoculus. All of us know your name, because our god has visited upon our dreams and tasked us with a mission. We were told that your brother had been killed, and that you have already mingled with his murderer. We are here to serve as justice against that which is unnatural."
Frederick's head began to swirl as if he might pass out, but he knew he couldn't afford to let himself do that, as he asked, his voice trembling, Who has killed him? Who has done this thing? If you know, I will make you tell me." The man hissed a laugh in response.
"I offer it freely, Hellwillwart. The man who has just left your company. He is your brother's killer."
Frederick's mouth fell open, and he quickly tried to sight the small curly-haired man, but he was already gone, as if he had wanted to escape from sight fast. Frederick's intuition told him that this stranger, though unknown to him, was telling the truth. He had learnt in his line of business to trust his instinct before anything, before his 5 senses even. Frederick began to growl with growing aggravation. "Why are you helping me in this?" Heoculus's smile was all the halfling could see. The lower part of the man's face was the only part not obscured. He replied, "Because we now have a mutual enemy." It was at about this time Frederick realized that he had recognized the man's robes. They were the colors of the priests of Mor. The halfling asked, "What business does the priesthood of Mor have with this man?" The priest answered, "He has offended Mor himself. Worse still, this man is a doctor, not simply taking lives, but saving them as he sees fit too. Anyone who would rescue a soul from Mor's reach is our enemy. I also hear word that he is friends with a Shalian priestess. They too cannot be abided, for they insult Mor with their every miracle cure." Normally Frederick would have heard that these words were the rantings of a crazed zealot, but his grief blinded him to that. Heoculus spoke. "We are the doorkeepers, a subsect of Mor's priesthood. We are more pure in vision than the mainstream, and we now selectively open our door to you, Hellwillwart." With that the man stepped forward and put his hand around the halfling, leading him further down the alley. "I need to introduce you to Ingrid's chosen." Epilogue. Maestro had mourned and eventually got on with his work again as time passed. He had discovered that Anastasia's future lay in Kislev, where a great battle against the forces of evil was due to happen. This battle would decide the fate of the world, and she had to be present at the time. No more details of that moment in the time thread properly presented themselves, for now. Sometimes all the pieces of reality are firmly set about in such a way that something unbelievable happens. Maestro was magically aligned with Anastasia's future path again, studying into the events to come and marking anything significant into a book. Much of it was jumbled and would need to be worked out later based on his writings. All of this, of course, had held him up from working on his own book of demon-related protection guidelines, but there was nothing that could be done about that. This was a most pressing business the college had set him upon. One such day, as Maestro gazed through the focusing point, a telescope turned backwards, he reasoned that by having the lens show the world of here and now from a great distance away, he could concentrate his mind on what was closer than that. a place his eyes naturally tried to fixate. This was actually working, though, helping him to see what should not be seen. On this day, though, a great but expected amongst his college thing happened within the cosmos. The moons in the sky above appeared to collide. Morslieb eclipsed Manslieb. It was considered a terrible omen upon the world, when the powers of chaos and evil were at their strongest, when the chaos moon was dominant and its balancing brother was nowhere to be seen. Maestro had forgotten that tonight was the start of Hexensnacht. A cursed time indeed, but if chaos was powerful now, all magic came from the realms of chaos, and hence there was a sudden wave of etheric flowing into the world, far stronger than was normal. This also coincided with one of the rare eldritch maelstroms that would glide over the old world, a storm of magic. At that very moment in time, one such fell storm surged through the magical pathways between the college and battlefield far away, where a blonde-haired heroic human called Felix Jaeger and an orange-crested dwarf named Gottrek Gurnison stared in amazement as thousands of once-dead bodies about them rose to walk again in a mass magical spell of reanimation that caused the winds of magic to explode outwards in all directions. This surge of combined events had sudden drastic effects upon magical spellcasters everywhere. Only 2 wizards, however, were casting magical spells at that exact moment of the magical storm's apex. One of the spellcasters was a bright wizard, fighting for his life inside a forest against dark elves who caught up to him in their hundreds. This wizard had decided to go down fighting and cast a simple fireball, aimed for their leader. At the moment of the storm's apex, his spell met a critical success the like of which had never been seen before in the old world's recorded history. A simple fireball instead came out as a massive plume of flame so wide that it could have decimated an army. As it was, it burned every dark elf pursuer to a crisp, as well as much of the forest too. The wizard stared at his hands in disbelief. One other wizard had been casting at that same time too. One Maestro Raphael Illefession. His magic had been a concentrated seer spell to divine the future. At that moment in time, his spell casting was met with a critical success, and as he peered into a future strand before him, it felt as if the future vision itself became clearer than it ever had before. The wallpaper in his room unstuck itself, folding upwards from etheric pressure. The furniture rattled, the nearby animals ran to escape. Many of the bricks in the building shook themselves loose, as did the door from its hinges and the fireplace from the wall. As Maestro stared, though, he was amazed at what he saw. It was as if he was looking at the vision with greater clarity than he had ever known. At that moment, though, he realized he had looked too deep, gone too far, saw the future too clearly and wholly, for the future at that moment in time decided to stare back at him. Suddenly, with a cracking of lightning that came through the roof, piercing 3 floors to reach him, Maestro appeared to disintegrate from its contact. He opened his eyes again, believing he was dead from the sudden pain that jolted his body. Then he realized that he was very much alive, and the vision he had seen was now even clearer still. In fact, his vision of the cold, snowy land of Kislev after its destruction, and the Tsarina's fall and consequential sacking of Altdorf, was so real that he began to shiver. A snowflake dropped onto his nose, then another glided down past his face, as his eyeball followed its descent all the way to the floor that was a carpet of white. He wasn't in the college anymore. He was inside the vision. No, wait, he realized. He was outside of the vision. He was in a place he shouldn't be. He had travelled through time. His bones told him that the place he stood in was wrong, that everything was out of sorts. He looked around him, but no element of the room he had been standing in remained. His legs and hands were shaking. He could not tell if it was from the shock or from the cold. Perhaps it was both, he wondered. He quickly clutched for the key to check that it was still around his neck. Yes, the key had made it too. At least he had that on him, he reassured himself. There were no words he could think of, though, to describe the fear inside of him at this darkest moment. He could only say one word. Gosh! He did not have Tordrad to protect him. He had no one. He wondered if anyone in this empire was even alive now. Stranger still was the overwhelming urgency he felt in his stomach, as if he was falling, yet his body wasn't. Something in him knew he was wrongly placed in the natural order of things, and it felt like the natural order might soon try to hiccup him out of this place to another. He only hoped that it would send him home.
Ha! Fat chance of that, I suspect, he said. Fate always has me cleaning up its dirty mess. Well, it looks like I'm going to be up to my neck in it again this time, mucking out its latrine.
Maestro wandered on through the snow with his teeth chattering. He decided he might as well have a look at how bad things are. And that is what he did.